Hello everyone and welcome to Azam Sharp Weekly. And in this video, I'm going to go over some of the common issues and maybe even bugs that are in the Swift data framework. Hopefully these bugs will be resolved in the future, but if you're watching this video and you can check the timestamp on it, then these bugs or limitations still exist. But before I do that, let's go ahead and take a look at our very simple application. I'm going to go ahead and run the application. And it's a application where you can track your expenses. So I'm going to go ahead and add a category. Let's call it groceries. And the amount can be, let's say, $200. So we have groceries, $200. I can go into groceries. I can update that over there on the top, or I can add a new transaction. Maybe I want to buy milk. Amount, let's say $6, add a transaction, and I can, let's say, buy cookies. Amount will be $2, but I want to buy, let's say, 6. So there you go. And I can go back and forth, add other items over here, add another one, maybe vacation. Let's say the budget is $2,000. And I can go to vacation and add some items in there. Let's say rental car, $250, and so on. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at our first limitation, bug, or just a weird behavior when you're using SwiftData. So this particular limitation or weird behavior is related to when you have some sort of an object, which in our case is budget object. It's been passed through some parent control or a parent view. And in the budget details screen, we want to show transaction, or we want to just fetch the transaction based on the title of the budget. Now, I know that we can go ahead and access all the budget transaction by saying budget category.transactions, since there is a one-to-many relationship between them. And you can take a look at the relationship right over here in the budget category class. We have a relationship for transactions, which is one-to-many. But just for sake of this particular limitation, what if we wanted to fetch all the different transactions based on the budget title? We have already created the query, which is transactions. Now, this is going to fetch all the transactions because we haven't really provided any filter, but we can change that inside our initializer. So I can go ahead over here and say transactions equals to query, and now I can pass in a filter, which basically means that I can pass in a predicate. So let's go ahead and pass in a predicate, which is a macro. It's going to give us a transaction, and now we can give some sort of a condition for the predicate. I'm also going to remove the sort because I don't really want to sort or animation. I don't really want to do any animation. Let's go ahead and type in something that should actually work. So if I say $0, which basically means the transaction, and give me, or the filter is basically based on this condition, and the condition is that if the amount of that transaction is greater than $5, then you are going to give me, those particular transactions. You're going to construct a query that will be based on this predicate. And if you run this application, it should still work. So let me go ahead and run it. I'll go to groceries. You can see it's giving me milk and cookies. And if I say vacation, it's obviously giving me this one, 250. I can also go ahead and change this to something else. Like I can probably go ahead and say $10. I don't know if we have anything more than $10, but we'll see. So I'll go to groceries. It's still, I forgot to change one thing. Actually, if I scroll down, we're not even using transactions. So I'll scroll down, and we'll use transactions. Now let's go ahead and run this, keeping in mind that the amount has to be greater than $10. And now it's giving us, you can see, all of them. So it's not limiting based on the budget. You can see inside the groceries, it's giving a rental card, which is $250. That's the only transaction that is more than $10. So that's fine. I mean, that's what we wanted to check it out. We're not really putting any filter on this that, oh, you're going to be returning me something that will be based on, the budget catalog or the budget category. But anyways, so let's say that now we want to perform this kind of like a check. So how can we do that? How about we say, give me all the things where the budget category dot title is equals to the budget category dot title. So basically, we're simply saying that whatever the budget category we're passing to you, so it can be groceries or vacation, just give me the transaction based on that. And once again, I know that we can access budget category.transactions to get all the transactions, but we're just learning about the predicate. So making that condition, let's go ahead and build the app. And it fails. So it doesn't like that approach. So how do we fix it? Should we go ahead and forcefully unwrap this budget category? Because in the transaction, if you look at the transaction, the budget category itself is nullable or optional. Let's go back, build it. Nope, it gives us the same exact issue. So it's not able to perform this particular operation. Or can it? Can it perform this operation? And maybe the problem is on the right-hand side. We never actually thought about that. What if I hard code this? What if I say groceries and I move this back to optional? Will that work? Well, that at least builds the application. Strange, right? Okay, let's go ahead and run the application. Okay, that's good. It's returning. So that means that that particular predicate is actually working fine. Even for vacation, it is showing us groceries because we hard-coded groceries. But obviously, we cannot really hard-code it over here. So we have to put the title. So budget category dot title. But we have already tried that, and that doesn't even compile. So how can we solve this problem? So this is kind of like a weird limitation that we can't really put the budget category in the predicate. One way to solve this problem is to simply move the title into a constant. So I'll go to budget title equals to budget category dot title. We didn't really do much. We simply moved the budget category dot title, which can be groceries or vacation, depending on where you clicked, and into a budget title. And now we can use that particular string variable over here. Okay, let's go ahead and run this again. Okay, looks like it's working. Looks like it's working perfectly fine now. So in order to put anything related to the budget category over here, we had to move it into a separate variable, and then we had to perform this. So this is kind of like a weird limitation that we have to go through. All right. Now, in actual application, if you're doing this, depending on the use case, I would probably simply go over here and use budget category dot transactions, and it will just give me all the transactions based on that particular budget category selected. But if you want to perform an actual query, then you will have to do something like this. So you can already see over here kind of like a limitation that we can't really pass in the budget category dot title directly in there. We have to move it into a string variable and then pass the string variable or any other type over there to make it work. So that is one of the first limitations. Let's go ahead and learn about some other limitations that we have. The other limitation is based on when you're using enums, again, with the predicate. Let's go ahead and see what I'm talking about. If I go to the transaction over here, you can see that I've created an enum called payment type. It's codable and it's also int, so that these values of credit, debit, check, and cash will be int values. And I also have a title associated with that, so credit will be credit, debit will be debit, and so on. Now in the transaction, we can start using payment type. So I'll say payment type, which will be of type payment type. And if we don't pass this, obviously the value will be simply null. Now over here, if you are passing in the initializer for the payment type, we can make it that by default it will be debit. And now I can go ahead and say payment type equals to payment type. So if you don't pass the payment type in the transaction, it will automatically be debit. Now, what if we want to perform some sort of a query, just like we were doing before, but this time we want to get all the transactions where the payment type was debit? Okay, let's go back to the budget details screen. And this means that we have to do it right over here inside our constructor. So now the question becomes that how should we do it? So let's go ahead and try to perform this query. Transactions equals to query. Again, we're going to use the filter one. We're going to provide the predicate with the transaction, something over here. That's the main thing. We don't really want the sort part or the animation part. So let's go ahead and remove that part. Now over here we can say that if the payment type is equals to, well, debit. Already you can see that it doesn't like it. It's not really allowing us to do that. How about if we say payment type dot debit like this? No, it still doesn't like that idea. So, okay, how about we put a value over here, payment type equals to, or payment type is payment type equals to debit. And then we pass in, just like we were doing it with the budget title before. So we'll say payment type. Well, that's interesting, because at least it was able to compile and build. All right. But right now, at this moment, we don't really have any transaction that is of payment type debit. So let's go and see. Over here, when we create the transaction, what we can do is maybe we can pass in the payment type, and we can probably make sure that it is hard-coded to debit. And just to make sure that we are actually persisting the transaction and that transaction is debit, we are going to go ahead and also try to display those transactions. So over here, I can say if the transaction dot payment type, or actually we should use if let payment type equals to transaction dot payment type. So we're just going to unwrap this. Then we can go ahead and say payment type dot title. So it's simply going to display the title of the payment type, which in our case, hopefully it will be debit. Let's go ahead and run the application. Now, if I go to groceries, you can see a lot of different errors being displayed in the console. Something about the SwiftData error, unsupported predicate. So this means that that particular predicate is already unsupported. What if I go ahead and add a new transaction? Let's say that I wanted to buy a cake. The amount will be $10. And when I click on add transaction, it should add the payment type to be debit, because we have already hard-coded this part, which is right over here. Now, if I run the application, we at least should have one payment type that is debit, but it never really is able to retrieve that. Just to make sure that we are using the correct transactions, you can see that we are. Okay, so that is definitely not working. So this means that we cannot really use enum values in our predicate also. And maybe the reason is that behind the scene in the database, when you use enums, you are actually not saving an enum itself, but you are saving the raw value associated with the enum. And maybe it's not able to compare those values. But what if we simply go over here and say raw value? I mean, can we just go ahead and compare with the raw value instead? No, it doesn't like that either. What about if we forcefully unwrap it? Okay, at least this makes it happy that we're forcefully unwrapping it, but this can cause problem because not every single item has this part, meaning not every single item has a default value for the raw value. So this is definitely going to blow up when you run it. So we can't really do that either. So we have to use this optional part or else it's not really going to work. Now, another way to try this out is what if the payment type is not optional and payment type is a required thing? So what if I go to transaction and make sure that the payment type is required? Let's go ahead and make everything required over here. This means that it's not really nullable. And if it's not really nullable, we can't really do all of that stuff. And this means that all of this stuff is also going to go away if payment type is not really optional. Then I can say transaction.paymentType.title. Now I do have to go and probably reset the app because some of the payment does not really have a payment type and that might cause an issue. Let me go ahead and run it again. And we'll start with something. Let's start with groceries. 200. Whoa, it just blew up. Couldn't find transaction.paymentType.raw value on the transaction with field and some error that is going on. Transaction with field, title, keypath title. Not really sure why it's looking for the raw value for the payment type for the title. All right. So that's another problem that we are facing over here, that it doesn't like that. So even though we have now provided or comparing against the raw values, it still is not liking this. What if I hardcode this? What if I just say 1? But I don't really think that's the issue. So again, we're going to have run into the same issue again. All right. So what other things we can do with this? Well, one of the things that you can do is currently not store the payment type as an enum, but create a property over here, payment type ID, which can be an integer. This means that now you can go ahead and say payment type ID, payment type.raw value. All right. And the payment type itself can become one of the other properties, meaning a computed property, payment type, raw value, and raw value can be created, or we can use the raw value to create a payment type. Let's go back over here. So now instead of using a payment type.raw value, we will have to use a payment type ID equals to the payment type.raw value. So basically we're just comparing integer versus integer. And if we scroll down over here, now our payment type is a computed nullable property or optional property. This means that all the code that we have written previously for if let should also work. Let's go ahead and run this again. Groceries. So it doesn't really display anything right now. I wonder if I go ahead and add something over here, will it display or not? So I'm going to say cookies. Okay, now it displays at least. There we go. debit. Now, what if I go over here when we are adding a transaction and I change this from debit to credit? So the next time I'm going to add something, add a new transaction, it's going to be a credit, just to make sure that it's working correctly or not. I'm going to go to groceries and I'm going to go ahead and add something over here. Okay, and you can see that it's not really displaying. And the reason it's not displaying is that because we are making sure that our predicate is only based on the debit. You can see on line number 34, the payment type debit is the only thing that we are looking for. All right. So this is, I think, another kind of a limitation where you can't really use enums in your predicate. The workaround for that situation is to just use a raw value in the enum. Obviously, it looks kind of weird, but it works, but it looks kind of weird. And hopefully, again, these things will be fixed in the future. Now, let's go ahead and check out another limitation or bug in SwiftData Framework. But before that, let's go ahead and thank our sponsors. This video is sponsored by Azam Sharp School. Become a highly valued iOS developer. This is my brand new website for hosting all of my video courses. You can see it looks beautiful. And I have also added membership options for monthly $25 or annually $249. And what's great about these membership plans is that it will give you access to all of these courses, which are current courses, plus I'm adding more, and all the future courses also. And you know that I love creating courses, so I'm always working on new ones. And check out these courses. I mean, test-driven development, MVVM in SwiftUI, MV in SwiftUI, reactive programming using Combine, full stack iOS development. You will not get these courses anywhere else. SwiftData Bootcamp. SwiftData, I mean, if you want to learn SwiftData, that's great. Reality Kit fundamentals, beginning, server-driven UI, and a lot more. Now, you can buy these courses individually, or you can simply go ahead and check out the membership options. But these are amazing courses, highly rated courses. You can check out the reviews at the bottom over here. I mean, I have like 16,000 reviews. These are just a few of them. So check out azamsharp.school and you will love these courses. Thank you so much. All right, so now let's go ahead and move to our final limitation bug, whatever you want to call it. And this particular bug is related to the unique attribute. So if I go to the budget category, you can see that the budget category has a title and that is marked with unique. Now, I'm not really using CloudKit or iCloud because if you're using iCloud or CloudKit, that you cannot really use a unique attribute. I'm not using any of that stuff. Okay, so let's say that we have this unique attribute. That's fine. This means that the title has to be unique. And we go to the budget details screen, the budget details screen from the budget list screen. And over here in the budget category, I'm going to make this bindable. And the reason I'm making this bindable is because so that I can use the properties of budget category to directly bind and update in the database. So once it is bindable, I can scroll down, find the actual title. So this is the title for my budget category. And since it's bindable, now I can use budget category dot title. All right. So this means that whenever I'm going to be typing in the title, that is automatically going to update budget category dot title in the database. All right. And now let's go ahead and run this. That's the only difference, the only thing I made. Now, one of the things that I want to also do is to add another category. So let's go ahead and add another category. We'll call it vacation, and we'll have a budget of $1,000. Okay, so now I have two different categories. We have groceries, we have vacation, and I'm going to go to groceries. I can go ahead and change the name to groceries to something else. So let's go ahead and say shopping. And this is unique because there is no other grocery category or budget category called shopping. So it should be okay. And it's already, you can see it's already updated. So if I go ahead and run the application again, it's shopping, which is great. But if I go over here and change this shopping to something that already exists, which is vacation, and it crashes. You can see this particular unique attribute is violated and it crashes. Now, I don't know if it's supposed to be crashing at that point. I mean, that's kind of weird. I think it should give you some sort of indication that, hey, I am like there's a bug or, like constraint has been violated or something is going on instead of just crashing the whole app. So that's kind of like a weird thing to do to give this kind of like a crash or, if it's not satisfying the, give it some sort of indication that something is going on instead of just, bailing out of the whole app. Another thing to note is that for our case, and this is the default, we are not performing the save function, meaning that when you have to save something, let's say over here, let's go to save. Where's the save function? Yeah, so we simply perform the insert. So context.save, I'm not really calling save because all the inserts and all the stuff is kind of like automatic. So that can be one of the reasons, but that's default. I mean, that's default option, all right? So that is something to note over there. But apart from that, I think that is definitely a bug. I mean, it shouldn't really just crash if it violates the constraint. It should give you some sort of an error or indication that, hey, something bad has happened. So just keep that in mind. So these are the couple of different limitation bugs, glitches, weird behavior, whatever you want to call it, in SwiftData. I'm sure there are more, and as I come across more, I'll make more of these videos. So thank you so much.